Yo, what's up guys? It's the new sensation, Big O Notation here, and today I'm actually going to be bringing you one of the decks from the newer set 13, that I've been really enjoying recently, and that is Blue Boujack. I'll be doing an in-depth deck profile breaking down my card choices and my tech choices, and I'll also be doing a little report on the Cardmarket Regional that I entered in last weekend, which I entered in using this deck, and so I'll go over specifically why I made certain card choices for the best of one format that the regional took place in, and I'll also go over like my matchups, how I played against each of the decks that I played against, how I would advise playing against them in the future, and overall just how I did really. So we'll get straight into it. To start off with, I'll just quickly break down the leader. So the leader has a permanent. He reduces the combo cost of all Blue Boujack brigades in your hand by 1. So most of them are 1 cost 5Ks, and there's also a 1 cost 10K. So he just makes them free to combo with, which is nice. And he has that permanent on both sides. Your leader's also very interesting because he doesn't draw on either side, which is something that really attracted me to the leader, because I found it very intriguing that this deck can gain a lot of advantage even though the leader doesn't draw at all. But what he does do is he has a once per turn activate battle, in which you can combo with a mono blue Bojack Brigade card from your energy, and then replace it with the top card of your deck in your energy in rest mode. So he has a different way of gaining advantage to most decks, which is really nice. Sort of similar to the King Piccolo leader that's been doing really well, but in a blue deck instead, which is really intriguing. I found the King Piccolo deck at the start of set 12 really fun to play, and I messed around with that for a little while, and then this has kind of replaced King Piccolo in my eyes, because I just find this deck a lot more fun to play and a lot more interesting. Often you get to really nice simplified game states where really small micro decisions end up hugely mattering in the long term. Another reason that I like this leader is his awakening conditions are exactly the same as the Sin Shenron leader, the yellow one, not the black one that's coming out in set 14. So when your life is at 3 or less, or if you have your specified cost of 4 unison in play, for this deck it will obviously be a blue one, then you untap 1, draw 2, and flip him over. On the back side, he's got exactly the same permanent and activate battle as the front side, but he also has a new once per turn auto, in which you pay 1 blue energy and you discard, I think it's just any card in your hand actually. I thought it was a mono blue card, but it doesn't matter because this deck is entirely mono blue. But you discard a card from your hand, and then you can only activate mono blue skills from your. You can only activate mono blue skills for the turn, and you cannot activate counters from the hand for the turn. Now that part specifying from the hand is really important, because there are some counters in the deck that will trigger in your energy and in your drop area. So that's a nice way to get around that effect. But the payoff of all of those conditions is that you get to untap 4 energy when your opponent attacks. So you effectively get 3 energy back because you're paying 1 blue energy to activate the auto. But it's still a really, really strong effect to have, especially when, with this deck, most of your battle cards are going to be played during or after the combo step, like after the battle. So it just gives you more energy to work with when you're playing defensively, and it's really nice to be able to help you flood the board for a push on your opponent's turn. So that's the leader, and we'll get straight into the deck now. So most of the deck, it has ways of abusing the leaders or activate battle to gain loads of advantage by playing battle cards from your energy after comboing with them. And I suppose the best way to go about it would to be going over the unison first. So this is your specified blue 4 cost unison, and so when you have him out, your leader can awaken. And we're running 3 of the Majin Buu unison, and I'm also running 1 of the Gotenks unison. So the Majin Buu unison is 20k double strike blocker, so he offers a lot of nice defense and offense if you choose to swing with him. And also the fact that he's 20k is really nice, because it means that your opponent has to sink really big swings into him to get markers off of him. He has a ±0 activate main, where you draw a card, and then at the start of your opponent's next main phase, you untap this unison and you untap 1 of your mono blue energy. If your leader card is blue, which it is in this case, obviously. So that's really great, because on turn 4 you can tap 4 to play him, use the activate main to draw 1, swing 20k double strike, and then during your opponent's turn you get 1 energy back and you get your blocker back, which is amazing. And it also has good synergy with the leader because your leader's auto only costs 1 blue energy, and you're getting 1 blue energy back from the Majin Buu, so you get exactly enough back to trigger your leader's auto if needs be. On the Majin Buu -1, he has an auto. When your opponent attacks with a battle card, you may choose one of their battle cards and place it at the bottom of its owner's deck. So that's incredibly strong for defensive utility. And being able to trigger his activate main during your turn and then an auto during your opponent's turn to effectively go +2, and then the fact that he's double strike blocker means this card is really, really insane. And most of the time, especially in aggro, when you're playing against aggro decks, your game plan is just to get to turn 4, set this guy up, and then you're able to gain huge amounts of advantage just off this card alone, because they're practically forced into killing it, or you're going to be gaining ridiculous amounts of advantage, and it makes the game almost unlosable if you can establish this unison down early. I'm only running 3 of him, because if you run 4 of him, then it gets really cloggy, and this one, you might argue that I am still running 4 specified cost unisons, and this Majin Buu would be better to run at 4 rather than 3 and 1. But my argument is that the Gotenks Unison offers you 20k dual attack blocker, so it can effectively swing for the same damage as the Majin Buu Unison, or be used as a blocker the same as the Majin Buu Unison. And the Gotenks Unison is just, the main reason that it's in here is the draw 2 cards is great, obviously, but the main reason that it's in here is to be used as really efficient barrier removal, because you can bottom deck up to 2 of your opponent's battle cards ignoring barrier with the -3. So, and the barrier removal is something that this deck really struggles with, because none of the other cards in the deck go through barrier, so this is your only barrier removal in the deck, really. And it's also just nice in case you need to clear out your opponent's board on turn 4 rather than being able to set up the Majin Buu Unison. And the 20k dual attack comes in really clutch as a nice way to close games. If you already have the Majin Buu Unison down, you swing once, tap 4 to drop the Gotenks Unison, and because Unisons are currently really hard to interact with, the 20k dual attack almost always goes through, or they have to combo out of it, which is really nice. So that's the Unison lineup for the deck at the moment. In terms of playing the deck, I would definitely recommend most of the time trying to get this Majin Buu out turn 4, because that is a really, really strong turn 4 play. And even if your opponent already has a board established, you can always use the -1 to clear one of their battle cards out, and then block a second battle card attack. So he's going to be absorbing at least 2 attacks per turn if you play him on turn 4, even if your opponent has a massive board, which is really nice. And oftentimes they're forced to just swing into the Majin Buu Unison anyway, because they don't want you to gain that constant advantage. The only issue with running these Unisons is that obviously you can't use your leader's activate battle, and you can't gain a lot of the advantage you normally would gain when they swing into the Unison. But the fact that they gain you so much advantage, especially the Buu Unison, the fact that they gain you so much constant advantage is absolutely worth it, and it allows you to access your Awaken really early on too. So for the cards that have effects when they're comboed with, we have 4 Zangya the Evildoer. So she's 3-drop 20k, none of that really matters though. The thing that matters is she's a 1-cost 5k, so in this deck she's 0-cost 5k. And she has an auto where when she's used in a combo from your battle area or energy, you draw 1 card. The fact that she can be comboed from the battle area never matters, because you're never hardcasting this for 3. But the main importance of her being in the deck at 4, and the main reason why she's so good, is because she can be comboed from the energy by your leader's activate battle, and then you immediately get to draw a card. So she effectively acts as a pseudo super combo, but for a 0-cost 5k and being comboed from energy. Or you could argue that she acts as the leader's draw power instead, but I would argue that being able to combo 5k every turn is the leader's draw power, because 5k is generally the value of 1 card if it was just a vanilla blank battle card. So she's just really great. If you see her turn 1, you always want to be keeping her in your mulligan. You always want to be charging her because she doesn't do anything in the hand, but as soon as you charge her, you can use her as a draw 1, and it's just really, really strong as a way to gain advantage in this deck. And then for the other main cards that are used in energy, we have 4 Boujack the Evildoer. So this is probably one of the best cards in the deck, if not the best card in the deck, except for the Margin Bu Unison, I'd argue. He's 20k dual attack, he's 5k combo, and his auto is for 1 blue and 1 of any energy. At the end of the battle in which this card is used in a combo from your hand or from your energy, you tap 2, and then you play this card from your drop area. So what's really important to note here is it triggers at the end of the battle, as with all of the combo to play cards in this deck do. So it's not like the it's not like an arrival skill or anything like that. It triggers at the end of the battle. So if your opponent is swinging with an attack that would kill you, you have to still combo out of the attack before you can bring these guys into play. But when he's played, he chooses up to one of your opponent's battle cards and just sends it to the bottom of the deck, regardless of cost, regardless of power, no restrictions like that. It just doesn't get through barrier. But like I mentioned earlier, the Gotenks is the main way we're getting through barrier in this deck. So the fact that he's just 20k dual attack, he comes in for 2 energy, and he bottom decks anything is so insane. He can be used great as an offensive tool for 2 20k swings and a +1, or as a defensive tool to just bottom deck a big swing that they might be saving for later in the turn. Because all of the combo into play cards come in at the end of the battle, something that's important to note for if you're playing Blue Boujack or if you're playing against Blue Boujack is that if you're playing the Blue Boujack deck and your opponent is swinging and then playing a battle card and then swinging, so they don't have a board open and they swing one at a time, that can make it a lot trickier for you to gain advantage, because you're going to be putting back into the deck the cards that have already swung, because the cards that they want to swing with later will still be in their hand. They won't have played them yet, if that makes sense. So that's just some good advice for if you're playing against Blue Boujack. Swing with the battle cards on your board before you start playing more out, because otherwise they'll just get killed off by the Blue Boujack cards during the earlier swings in the turn. For some of the other Bojacks that we have 3 of the tournament pack Boujack Rampaging Agent of Destruction. He's a 0 cost 5k. He's the only 0 cost 5k, I think, in the entire deck. Actually, no, that's not true. There's at least one more. But he's one of the only 0 cost 5ks that has an effect when he's comboed with. So that's really important to note for Galactic Buster, which we'll get into later down the line. He acts as a pseudo deadly defender. So when he's in rest mode, your opponent can't attack leader cards with battle cards that have higher than or the same energy cost as their current energy. So this is obviously really important in a lot of matchups like Sin Shenron, like Dark Broly. Just so many decks nowadays cheat in big guys for almost no energy cost, and that's why this card is so strong. And the fact that he doesn't have Unique is so good as well. Originally I thought he had Unique because I just assumed that the card would, because it's so good. But you can actually play multiple cards of these down at the same time, and that's really nice. He has an auto for 1 energy, where if he's comboed from hand or from the energy, then he gets played in rest mode. So the fact that he gets played in rest mode is nice because it means his Deadly Defender effect is live. And he has a final auto where when he's KO'd, he draws a card. So that's really nice because your opponent is likely going to be swinging into him so that their bigger attacks can connect to your leader. And so if he does eventually die, you just get to freely draw a card, which is great. Something to watch out for is against decks like Dark Broly or against even like the Mirror Match or something. If they can bottom deck the Boujack or if they can warp it or something like that, then you won't get the draw, which is important to note. So good to play around that. And I think for the final actual Boujack card of the deck, we have 4 Boujack on a Rampage. This is kind of like your boss monster of the deck, or it's an in-archetype boss monster at least. So he's a 1 cost 10k, which is really important to note because your leader still reduces his combo cost. So he's a 0 cost 10k in this deck, which is really incredible. He's double strike dual attack 30k. He can EX evolve for 5 energy and draw 2 cards over a Boujack with an energy cost of 3 or 4. So that will either be your 4-drop Boujack, which we went over, or the 3-drop TP. And so he can evolve over those, and then that'll be nice to double strike dual attack swing. He also has an auto for 1 blue and 3 of any energy. At the end of the battle, when he's comboed from hand or energy, you draw a card, bottom deck one of your opponent's battle cards, and then play him in rest mode. So there's a couple of things to explain about this auto which are incredible. The fact that he has the draw and the removal in the same auto as being able to play himself is incredibly strong, because it gets around a lot of things. It gets around every counterplay that would get rid of him. So like Trunks counterplay would bounce him back to hand, but you still get the draw one and you still get the removal effect. It gets around things like the Sin Shenron 9-drop, because his skills get negated, sure, but the auto resolves first, because he doesn't get played until the end of the auto. So it just gets around really nice things like that, where you can instantly remove stuff and draw a card before he gets played. And he's just such a strong card. Also, the fact that he's played in rest mode is important for a later auto, but it's also important to note that when you EX evolve him, he doesn't get played in rest mode. So if you're looking to go on the offensive on your turn, it can be sometimes better to EX evolve him down over one of your Bojacks and then get the double strike dual attack swing in, because otherwise he'll be played in rest mode. His second auto is once per turn. If this card is in rest mode and your opponent swings with a battle card, you untap one of your energy and tap down one of their energy, which is just great to be a nuisance, especially against, if you can get this down against aggro decks or mid-range decks. It just reduces their tempo so much, because one energy in this game is really a huge difference, and especially for this deck when you're running cards like Bean, one energy can be incredibly good, and also with it can help you trigger the leader auto. So that card, if you can get that guy established onto the board, it's really, really hard for your opponent to come back. So for another combo into play cards, we have the Evildoers. So the first one being Gokua. He's a 20k beta, which is incredible because he plays himself for only one energy after being comboed from hand or energy. And when he does play himself, he bottom decks one of your opponent's 1-drops. So a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that Black Marseillan is really good against this deck, the Dark Power Black Marseillan 1-drop that stops you playing 15k or less guys. And at a first glance, this deck does struggle to deal with that card. But when you take into account cards like Gokua, who's 20k, so gets around the Black Marseillan, and can bottom deck a 1-drop, and you also have your 4-drop Bojack as well, who's 20k and can bottom deck anything. So Dark Power Black Marseillan is really not a hindrance to this deck, and if you're playing against this deck, or if for some reason you're siding for this deck, I wouldn't recommend siding in Dark Power Black Marseillan against this deck, because unless they really, really brick, it's not really an issue for this deck to deal with. Unless maybe you're playing like a hyper aggro deck, like maybe Gogeta Zeno, or maybe even Margin Vegeta, you could side Dark Power Black Marseillan against this deck just to hinder the plays a little bit further. But all in all, it's not a great card against this deck because there's a lot of different ways to deal with it. The reason that I ran 4 of this card was because the Cardmarket event was best of 1, so I was expecting a lot of aggro, and aggro decks often run 1-drops, because 1-drops at the moment are pretty strong. There's a lot of good 1-drops to deal with. But also because even against like mid-range and control decks, they still run a lot of 1-drops, and just gaining that +1 where you play this guy down after a combo step, and then you can bottom deck as somebody's 1-drop, maybe like a cantrip they played earlier. Just those really tiny interactions where you gain one tiny bit of advantage can be really, really impactful for this deck, because it's a really slow deck to end up winning with. Often what this deck struggles with is actually having a win condition other than just swarming the board. I would argue that in best of 3 and potentially after the next ban list, depending on what gets hit, this card could come down to 3 copies, and maybe siding the 4th copy, but at the moment this is one of the best cards, or one of the best Evildoers in the deck, and I would recommend running 4. Especially if Gogeta Zeno doesn't get hit in the next ban list, which I personally don't think it will. This card should stay at 4, because this card carries you really hard in the Gogeta Zeno matchup, because you can constantly bottom deck their 1-drops, and because the 1-drops aren't going to drop or warp, it becomes completely useless for them, which is really strong. Some of the other Evildoers we have are 2 Beedoo the Evildoer. The reason that I'm only running 2 of this card, I was originally running 3, and then I tested it and found that 2 is much better. It's just because it has unique, really. This is one of the few Evildoers that do have unique. He's 15k crit, he plays himself for 1 energy after being comboed with from hand or energy. And then if it's your opponent's turn, he untaps 1 energy as well, which is really strong. And if that weren't enough, he also has an activate main for once per turn for 1 energy. You can bottom deck an opponent's battle card with energy cost 3 or less. So he acts as removal, he acts as 15k crit to pressure, and he acts as effectively a free card if you can get his second auto off, which is really strong. This card's a really good card for the deck, but because he has unique, it's only really worth running 2. And oftentimes you don't massively miss him if you don't see him, because this deck has quite a lot of removal anyway, and it also has some decent crit pressure, which we'll get into later. The other unique evildoer is the Boujack, and I'm also running 2 copies for the same reason. Sometimes in some matchups, this card feels like it just carries you along with the tournament pack Bojack, and in some matchups, this card is completely useless. He's a 5k blocker, and he plays himself for 1 energy after being comboed from hand or energy. And when he's played, you choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with an energy cost greater than their current energy, and it can't attack or be comboed with until the end of your opponent's next turn. So if your opponent plays this, if you play this during your opponent's turn, it effectively locks them out of the chosen card for 2 whole turns, which is really, really strong. But in some matchups, this card is like completely useless, like against any sort of control deck or even a lot of mid-range decks. They don't really cheat in a lot of battle cards for massive amounts of energy, and if they do, they're likely just swinging with it immediately. So Boujack is often pretty useless in those times. But the fact that he's a blocker still makes him useful in situations like those, like even against Blue Baby. Sometimes just having a blocker down is really nice. And in matchups like against Dark Broly or Sin Shenron aggro, this card is just your lifeline. Like, drawing into this card is super key in matchups like those. So that's all of the combo into play guys. For a couple of the other Bojack Brigade cards I have 4 of Goku the Calamity. He's a 1-drop. When he's played, he searches the top 5 for your specified 4-cost blue unison. Or you can add up to 1 Bojack Brigade, but it has this annoying stipulation which says you can only add it if it costs 3 or less. So some of the cards you won't be able to add are the 4-cost Bojack or the 8-drop Bojack, which is really, really frustrating, because being able to search those cards in this deck would be so much better. And it's really annoying because oftentimes you see those cards in the top 5 and you really wish you could grab them, but you can't. But oftentimes early game, one of the best targets you can get is Zangia or maybe Goku. But it really depends on the matchup. Like if you're against Sin Shenron, you want to grab Boujack. If you're against a slower control deck, you probably want to be grabbing the Beidou to help you with crit pressure. But it really depends on the matchup with this card and what you see in the top 5. He also has an activate battle for once per turn. For 1 energy, you can give him plus 11k power and crit until the start of your next main phase. So if you have just a spare energy to use, you can tap 1 and make him a 15k crit swing for an entire turn as well, which is really strong. So this card comes in really nicely just as a turn 1 play. I think he's your only turn 1 play in the deck unless you're swinging and comboing guys in. Something else that I want to note quickly on that as well is that oftentimes your leader does not want to be attacking in this deck because you're not gaining inherent advantage off of it. And unless you've put them into really low life and you're looking to kill them, or if you're looking to proactively play guys on your turn, those are the only really 2 situations that you want to be swinging with your leader in this deck. Is if you want to be making use of the activate battle on your turn, or removing some of their battle cards, or you're looking to pressure their leader and maybe try and kill them that turn. Oftentimes you don't need to swing with the leader in this deck because swinging with the leader on its own doesn't give you any inherent advantage, and if you're swinging at their leader, then they're going to gain cards from their life, which can be problematic for you later down the line. So for some of the last Bojack Brigade cards, we have 2 Boujack. He's just a simple 1-drop negate and he plays himself, but he has a nice stipulation in the counterattack effect, which is that he can also activate his negate attack in the energy, and if you want to be doing that, then you have to tap the energy anyway, and then he plays himself from the energy. You have to discard a card from your hand, and then he replaces himself using the top card from the deck, placing it into the energy in rest mode. So that's really nice because oftentimes with your leader effect, if you're comboing cards from the energy, then you want to be replacing them with other good cards in the energy. So you want to often be hitting chains of Bojack Brigade cards off of the top of your deck when you're using the leader activate battle. And this is another decent target for that, because if it gets stuck in your energy, you really don't mind because it's effectively still in your hand. And another important thing to note is that this being able to negate from the energy gets around the leader auto, because the leader auto stipulates that you can't activate counters from your hand for that turn. But if this guy's in your energy, you can still cast this because it's in your energy. So that's really nice. And also something important to note is with the Gokua and the Bujin, if you have them stuck in your energy and you maybe don't want to use the Bujin negate or something, you can always just combo them off with the leader activate battle, and then replace it with the top card of your deck to try and hit a better Bojack Brigade in your energy, because they're still Bojack Brigades, and just because they don't have effects when they're comboed with, doesn't mean that, you know, they can't actually be used in the activate battle effect. So that's something important to note as well. For some of the non-Bojack Brigade cards, we have a couple of big hitters in the deck, so I'm just going to go over them as well. So for the secret rare, I've chosen to go with Baby Hatch. I wasn't originally running the Super Pycon card because I don't actually own Baby Hatch. I was borrowing this for the event. And I think Super Pycon is a good budget alternative, and it synergizes nicely with the leader untap 4 because it taps 4 to play itself. But all in all, Baby Hatch is probably just better for the deck, I think, especially in such an aggressive meta that we're in, and especially when I was going into the Cardmarket Regional expecting a lot of aggro because it was a best of one format. So Baby Hatch is just really good in terms of those situations, and also just the fact that you can build up a board during your opponent's turn or during your turn, and then drop Baby Hatch to stop them really doing anything to that board, and then give you another chance to swing in with a bunch of damage on that board is really good. And then for some of the other big hitters, we have 2 Energetic Frenzy Kefla. This has to be one of my favorite cards in the deck. This card just feels incredibly strong when it goes off. So it gets its cost reduced by 1 for each of your blue battle cards, so it can go down to 3. And it has an activate main where you draw 2, and then during your opponent's main phase you can untap 2. And more often than you would think, you can have situations where you have the Margin Boo Unison down and you can drop a Kefla down, and then you're drawing 3 and untapping 3 every single turn, which is just ridiculous. Like, it's in those types of game states where the deck gets really, really out of hand. And because you're comboing a load of guys into play during your opponent's turn, so defensively, then oftentimes you can pass turn, just draw, charge, pass, and then combo into play a bunch of guys to fend off your opponent's swings, and then you'll have a board just from your opponent trying to attack you, and then next turn you can just drop Kefla for like 4 or 3 energy. So this card is like one of the best cards in the deck, definitely. And oftentimes if you don't have your Unison on turn 4, this is the next best thing to play, because it sort of acts similarly to your Unison. It doesn't provide the same defenses, but it provides you with an extra card and an extra energy each turn, which is really, really nice. For the last kind of finisher card, or big hitter I like to call them, we've got a copy of Android 17 Turning the Tide. Now, going into the Cardmarket Regional, I was really, really unsure about this card. I'd been testing it a lot, and I found that it wasn't really working as well. And I'd heard a couple of people recommending to play like Fu Shrouded instead, because it comes down a turn earlier. And I don't have any Overwhelm in the deck. But my argument against Fu Shrouded is that because it's a black card, and your leader can only untap mono blue energy, a lot of the cards in the deck combo into play requiring mono blue energy. If the Fu Shrouded gets stuck in your energy, then it's really, really tricky to actually continue playing the game, especially if it gets stuck in there early and you're playing against an aggressive deck. Then you're going to really, really struggle to actually keep tempo up and be able to stay on par with that deck. But Android 17 is really nice because it's blue, so it has good synergy if it gets stuck in your energy. It's also a blue 1-cost 10k, which means it can be used for Galactic Buster along with Energetic Frenzy Kefla if needs be. And it's also just a really incredible finisher, and combining this card with Baby Hatch as well is really nice, because oftentimes you can drop Baby Hatch on turn 6 once you've built up a board, and then you can drop this down turn 7, and if you've got a board ready with Baby Hatch to protect you, this is often just game, and a lot of times this is how I actually managed to finish the game in the Cardmarket Regional. So Android 17 was actually a huge MVP for my deck, which I really didn't expect, because I expected to play a lot of aggro decks. But I'll get into all of that in the tournament report a bit later. For the last battle cards, I've got 4 Zeno Super Combo. This is just the best super combo to run in the deck. I wouldn't recommend running anything else at all. This just helps you fix your energy constantly, and oftentimes you get a lot of cards stuck in your energy because of your leader activate battle. So even if your opponent sees the secret rare in your energy because it got hit off the activate battle, and they'll be like, oh no, that's great, when they're not going to have to worry about Baby Hatch anymore, you can just slam this down, super combo, grab it back to hand, and then put a Zangia into energy, and then Zangia acts as a sort of like a draw 1 anyway. So this card is just incredibly strong for the deck, and I wouldn't recommend anything else. For some of the extra cards, I have 4 copies of Galactic Buster. This is another one of the best cards in the deck. This card is so strong as a good defensive tool, and it can be used offensively too. So it has an activate battle. It's 0 cost first off as well, which is really good. So its activate battle is you combo with a mono blue battle card with combo cost 1. So that can be any of your 1-cost 10ks, which are like most of the non-Bojack Brigade cards in the deck, or any of your 1-cost 5ks, which are most of your Bojack Brigades. You combo with that from your energy, you draw 1 card, you place this into your energy in active mode if it's your opponent's turn, and then at the end of the battle you have to rest 1 of your energy. So a couple of things to clarify with this is, most of the time you don't want to use it offensively unless you think you can kill them that turn, because you're going to be down in energy if you don't kill them. But also, the only Bojack Brigade I believe in the deck, apart from some of the 1-drops that aren't used generally to combo from energy, the only one that you can't combo with using Galactic Buster is the tournament pack, because it's a 0-cost 5k. So that's something really important to watch out for. If you're charging a lot of your tournament pack promos, then you want to be really aware that you can't use Galactic Buster on them. And then finally, so also you can only use this card once per turn. And then finally, the fact that you have to rest an energy at the end of the battle is really strong, because of the fact that the rest of your Bojack Brigades also trigger at the end of the battle, and because they're your skills, you get to choose the order of them. So if you have, say, 1 energy open and you drop Galactic Buster on your 4-drop Bojack, so what happens is you have the 1 energy open, and then you have the Bojack in the energy. You play down a copy of Galactic Buster, you draw a card, you combo with the Bojack, you send this into energy, and then end of battle comes around. You can choose to trigger the Bojack effect first to tap 2 energy and then play him down. And then you can choose to resolve the Galactic Buster, and because you have no more energy to rest, you don't have to rest anything. So it effectively acts as a Senzu Bean that also draws a card, and lets you combo with a Bojack Brigade. Like, it's so strong. I have seen people cutting this card down to 3, which I definitely understand, because you can only use it once per turn, which is really frustrating. And against some of the more control matchups, this card is completely dead in a lot of situations. But I was choosing to run 4, and I think that 4 is correct currently, because the meta is still pretty aggressive. We have a lot of really aggro decks running around, and because it was a best of 1 regional that I entered with this deck, I expected a lot of aggro, so I decided 4 of this was definitely going to be a lot better than 3, because I figured seeing multiple copies of this card in an aggressive meta would be better than seeing no copies, and it worked out in the end. I think I would definitely keep this at 4 going forward, unless it Maybe for best of 3 I would take this down to 3, but in best of 1 I'm going to keep it at 4, I think. And then we have 3 Senzu Beans for some of the other extra cards. I was originally running this card at 4, but I chose to cut it down to 3 as per a friend's recommendation. And I honestly think that 3 is actually correct for this deck, because you don't generally, if you see multiples of this card, it feels really, really bad because of the value of diminishing returns, and just being able to you only really want to be using this card once per turn, because the 1 energy is the most value that you're going to get out of this, like the 1 extra energy. If you're using 2 per turn and you're going up to like 25k on the backside, then obviously your opponent can't really swing into you then, unless they're playing a deck like Dark Broly. But it also means that you're missing out on the Bojack Brigade cards, and it means that you're not going to be able to use that energy as effectively because you won't have as many good options in your hand if you're seeing multiples of this. And it also means that if you're using your leader's Activate Battle, you have a higher chance of comboing this into your energy rather than a Bojack Brigade, which is also really bad. I think that 3 is just good for this deck, honestly. I tested 4 before, because I used to have it at 4, but I don't think that 4 is necessary for the deck, because you already have Galactic Buster as a way to kind of give you back the energy already. And you already have a decent amount of untap, like you have the Majin Buu Unison, you have the Kefla, you have your leader's auto as well to untap energy, and that's really all you need. Like, you don't need 4 Senzu Beans in my opinion. So for the last 2 cards of the deck, I have 1 Chilled Army Reinforcement and 1 All Too Easy. So often people are very surprised when they see these types of cards in this deck rather than a copy of Dimension Magic or something, because Dimension Magic has really good synergy with the deck, obviously, because you're able to take your life down to 3 if you want to awaken aggressively. You're also able to untap energy again, which is really nice for this deck, because you're going to be playing a lot of cards during your opponent's turn. But something that I found with the deck is that generally negates aren't really what you want to be using, because you gain most of your advantage when you're comboing, and negates lock you out of being able to combo. So I found that just running these 2 was enough for me, because Auto Easy is reusable. It effectively acts as 2 negates if you remember to use it. And Chilled's Army Reinforcements also will be able to deal with 2 attacks because it spawns the blocker in. And something that's really strong about Chilled's Army Reinforcements, and a reason why I was even considering upping it to 2 copies, was because the blocker spawns, the fact that the token has blocker means that you can actually combo with your Bojack Brigade cards when they swing in and you block with the second attack. So the fact that you can combo in Bojack Brigades on your effectively what is your negate is really, really strong, and that just made this card was one of the MVPs for the day for sure. And also the fact that you could take your own life was really strong. This card came in massively clutch, especially on turn 4 when I'd want to be defending my Majin Buu Unison, because I could take my own life to go down to 3 life, and I could also block 2 attacks on the Majin Buu Unison while still making use of the -1 auto. So that was just really strong, and those are the last 2 cards for the deck. Something else that I want to touch on quickly about the idea of running too many negates in the deck, because we already have the 2 Boujins in here as well. I've seen people running 3 of this, and I think that that's incorrect. I think that clogs up way too much, and it doesn't give you enough space for proactive plays in the deck. But also the fact that you have Baby Hatch in the deck. Another big argument for Super Pycon in the deck is that you don't want to be forced into negating attacks, because you want to be comboing from energy, you want to be comboing from hand, and that will allow you to gain most of your advantage and bring in your battle cards into play. And that is a very fair argument, and that's a very strong argument for Super Pycon. The main reason I wanted to run Baby Hatch is because people are playing around so much battle removal at the moment, because there are cards in the format that exist, such as Heroine's Lineage, such as the Great Ape SCR, just all sorts of ways to remove cards during battle, like the Haze Shenron. So people are just going to be inherently playing around that, and a lot of people have learnt to only swing for game with unisons or leaders because they're much harder to interact with. And that is rightly so, obviously, because if I were running Super PyCon, then I'd be able to bounce a kill swing to their hand after they've full comboed in, which is very funny. And if you want to see a funny game, I think Jamie is going to be releasing a couple of games that I played against him in testing. So definitely watch those over on his channel. I'll have the link down below. That's on the Scrub Games channel. But we had some great games, especially a big highlight of mine was when I was running the Super PyCon SCR. It came in really clutch in one of our games, which was very funny. But yeah, the main reason that I'm running Baby Hatch is because people are learning to swing with leader and unison for game a lot more, and those are unaffected by the Super PyCon, obviously. So Super PyCon doesn't really help you in those situations. And also, not only that, but decks are becoming a lot more leader focused and a lot more unison focused. So say like Majin Vegeta, like Reboot Gohan, obviously, but that wasn't legal for the best of one. But even decks like King Cold as well, which was a matchup that I was a little bit scared of going into this event. Baby Hatch is much better than Super PyCon because they don't really flood the board all that much unless you're playing into their counterplays. They're mostly just looking to whittle your resources down and then go in with leader swings. And Baby Hatch is a lot better than Super PyCon in that matchup, in my opinion. So yeah, that's the main reasons that I was running Baby Hatch for over Super PyCon. And I am going to be actually looking to try and get a Super Hatch, a Baby Hatch of my own now, so that I can play this deck and have it be fully my own, rather than running Super PyCon all the time. But if you have Super PyCon and you don't own Baby Hatch like me, I definitely recommend still playing the deck. But Super PyCon definitely allows for some very, very exciting highlights, which are very funny. So if you're only really interested in the deck profile, I'd recommend stopping watching now. I'll also probably have a link in the description for a Deck Planet thing of this deck, so that you guys can just copy and paste it into Untap to give it a test. But here I'm going to be going over some of my matchups for the Cardmarket Regional and some of the just ways that I played around things, some of the ways that I would recommend playing against different matchups, and especially, or with this deck at least, and just kind of what happened on the day. So for my first round, it was 8 rounds in total. For my first round, I was against a Cooler Mill deck. And Cooler Mill is actually a really tricky matchup for this deck because your leader is comboing cards from energy and then replacing them with the top card of the deck. So you're kind of automatically burning through your deck anyway. And also this deck actually draws quite a lot, especially if you can establish the Majin Buu Unison or the Kefla down really early on. So it's quite tricky for you to be able to beat Cooler Mill, and it's especially tricky when you're trying to balance being able to survive against their double strike coolers and being able to not get milled out. So it was a very tricky match. I ended up losing in the end, but I'm gonna put it down to luck because I'll explain why just now. What I managed to do is I managed to build up a pretty significant board. He had his Gohanks Unison down on turn 4 or 5, or I can't remember how much it exactly costs, but I think it was on turn 5 that he managed to establish it. I managed to get down an 8-drop Bojack, and I used Baby Hatch to try and stop his potential arrival plays, because I thought he'd go a little bit more aggressive with the mills, because I think I was on 3 cards left in deck. This was on his turn 7, I think, or turn 6. So I just dropped Baby Hatch to try and stop him from getting some more mills down, because I knew that I was really close to losing. And I think I was also on pretty low life, so I just wanted to defend my leader. And he was on a total of 2 life, I believe. And so the way that it went down was... Oh no, he was on 3 life, my apologies. So I drop Baby Hatch, I stop him swinging. He has a Herculean Majin Buu on board in active mode, and he has a massive hand, basically. I don't have all that much in hand, but my game plan for the matchup was to stall until turn 7, which is what I'd managed to do. I got to turn 7 with the baby hatch, and then drop an Android 17 with a decent sized board and try and kill him through that. And if I couldn't kill him through that, then it was sort of okay, because Android 17 would put cards back into my deck, so it would give me the opportunity to kind of extend the game longer than it would normally. So I did that. I dropped Android 17 down. I then proceeded to... So he had no cards in hand. He only had his Gohanks Unison and his Hercule Boo down. And then I obviously had no cards in hand as well. So I went and swang with the Double Strike Dual Attack Bojack. And then his Gohanks put it down to 5k for the turn. He was on... yeah, he was on 3 life at this time or something. But I swung with the Double Strike Dual Attack Bojack because if I can get through his... Oh no, I think I swung with the Android 17 first, so I critted off a life, just so that I got that guaranteed crit swing off. I critted off one of his life with Android 17. I then swung in with the Bojack to try and swing for game, and he minus 25k'd it to make it 5k. And I used my leader effect to combo with an 8-drop from my energy to make it into a 15k swing, which would, if he didn't combo out, it would push for game. And then so he obviously comboed with his Hercule Boo from the board, putting him at 2 life, and I had a 5k Bojack, which wasn't going to do anything because I had no energy open. And I also had my leader swing still open. I was awakened at the time because I was on 3 life, and I also had my baby hatch swing. So I swung with leader to get him to 1 life, and he had... So at this point he has 1 random card in hand from life and 1 life left. So I go to swing with baby hatch, 40k swing, and luckily for him, he managed to rip the testing the opposition negate off of his life. So it was just a little bit unlucky on my part. And then the next turn he top decked the 5-drop freezer that triple striked me for game. So that was just a shame. So that was my game 1. I think that my thought process is that on a good day, this deck can definitely win an event, and on a bad day, this deck can still top an event. I think that this deck is really strong, and especially going into the next format, none of the cards on here are really going to get hit. The only card that I could potentially see getting hit is Senzu but they're probably only going to errata it. I wouldn't say they'd outright ban it. And even if they do ban it or errata it in some way, it's not a massive hit to this deck because I'm only running 3 copies and it's not a key card to the deck at all. You can always replace it with some other cards, like maybe even Dimension Magic, maybe a second Chilled's Army, some other cards. But anyway, back to the tournament report. So round 2, so I was 0-1 at this point. Round 2, my opponent didn't show up, so I got a free win, which was pretty nice. And then round 3, I was against a Mechikabura player, I believe, in which I was able to establish a 4-drop Boo Unison really early on turn 4, which was amazing. And because I went first, I was able to ensure that he wasn't going to be dropping his 8-drop Mechikabura and getting the swing through, because as soon as I had this margin Boo down, I knew that I was just going to save at least 1 marker every turn to get rid of his 30k or 35k double strike from the big Mechikabura. So I just did that every turn, kept on stalling the game out, cleared out his board every so often, and then eventually I just dropped Android 17 again and killed him. So Android 17 was putting in huge work in the early rounds for me. I can't remember what my next matchup was, in fact. I think it might have been some sort of other control deck. I can't remember what it was, but I just remember... Oh, that's what it was. It was actually the mirror matchup, which I was not expecting at all. Luckily, I tested it because my friend Jamie has been playing Bojack as well. He's been playing Blue Boujack as well as me. And so we tested a game a couple of days beforehand because we just wanted to see how that matchup would go down. And I got some really good information from that matchup. And I managed to put it to use in the actual game. So the idea was to establish the Unison down and try and keep it alive. So I made sure that when I dropped my Unison, I had it backed up by All Too Easy and by my Boujack negate, so I had two ways to definitely keep it alive. So I just kept on swinging at his Unison, making sure that he couldn't combo into play cards, and then I was getting through his hand pretty quickly because he'd gone very aggressive early. And something that I really, really want to drive home to you guys is that if you are ever playing the mirror matchup, it is really, really important to try. There's this idea, I don't know, some of you might have heard of this idea of the control and the beatdown. I think they're phrases from Magic. But the phrases aren't particularly important. What matters is that they represent kind of the aggressor and the more defensive player in any given game. And because often that's just determined by which decks each player is playing, but in the mirror matchup, it's obviously not able to, that's not determined by what decks each player is playing, because you're effectively running the same decks. You're going to be running a lot of the same engine cards, and apart from maybe 5 to 10 tech choices, you're really going to have exactly the same deck. And in those styles of matchups where your decks are almost exactly the same because it's a mirror match, it's really, really important to try and be the control player. So it's important to maybe take a bit of damage early, let your opponent kind of build up a little bit of a board if that goes towards the game plan, but just try and take your time, because oftentimes your own deck won't be able to kill you faster than you can defend against it, unless it's a massively aggressive deck. And so it's really important to try and be able to just let yourself take a bit of damage, get those cards into your hand, and then try and kill them on the clapback, or just start controlling the game and removing their board rather than just going out all out for their leader. Because oftentimes, most of the time, the player who acts as the control in a mirror match is the player that will come out on top. And so I put that theory to use in the mirror matchup. Just being able to focus on clearing his Unison. He put me to 3 life by around turn 4, I think, because he was dropping his 1-drop Gokua, he was dropping his 3-drop Gokua really early, and that just gave me a massive hand, and it meant that I could sit comfortably behind my Unison and have an awakened leader really early on, and just be able to defend my Unison and then swing at his and get through it really easily. And then what eventually ended up happening was he had around 6 cards in hand, and he had like an 8-drop Boujack on board, but nothing else. And I had a reasonably sized board, and I dropped Baby Hatch so that he couldn't swing any more times to gain advantage, because in this deck, the only way that you really gain massive amounts of advantage is by being attacked or attacking, because you play cards during the combo. So I used Baby Hatch to stop his attack so that he couldn't play any more guys down, and then come turn 7 I just dropped Android 17, put his entire hand back, and I think I took him from around 5 life to 0 in 1 turn, because I was able to follow it up with cards like the Gotenks Unison to swing 20k dual attack. And yeah, the Android 17 just completely ruined him. So that's something important to know. Android 17 is just really clutch in those styles of matchups, but also in mirror match, just try and be the slower player, just try and be the control player rather than the aggressor, because often the aggressor is the one who ends up losing because the game goes a little bit longer than you might expect in mirror matches. Something that I just remembered, which I really want to clarify, is I see a lot of people using Blue Boujack and just awakening as soon as they get the Unison down, which against decks who will clear out your Unison easily is a very strong play, because you want the ability to awaken and get the extra 5k boost. But also, if you just have the ability to awaken whenever, you can wait until a time where you have 2 Boujack cards in your energy that you want to combo with, and then when you're either attacked or you swing, you use the front side activate battle, you awaken mid battle, and then you use the backside activate battle to combo both in. That's just something I wanted to quickly clarify that I forgot about to talk about earlier. But anyway, back to my matchups. I then played against 3 Shin Shenron decks in a row. I believe that was round, so Blue Boujack was round 4, so round 5, round 6, round 7, I played against 3 different Sin Shenron decks. The first one was against Roy Jansen, I think his name is. Shout out to him, he's a lovely guy. I played against him in the last Cardmarket Regional that I played in, which was the one that I won. He's a really nice guy, and I really enjoyed playing against him again, and he's got some really interesting deck builds when it comes to Sin Shenron. But he managed to win the match that I played against him. I've been testing the Bojack versus Sin Shenron matchup a lot, and often it comes down to whether Blue Bojack can go first or not. Not always, but most of the time it comes down to that, because a lot of the time you can survive their turn 3, even if they have like Salzino, even if they have like God Hand. If you can get enough tournament pack Bojacks down and you can get enough Boojins down, you're able to survive their turn 3 pretty consistently. And then if you're going first, you're then immediately able to follow up with the Majin Buu Unison on turn 4, which just kind of puts the Sin Shenron player out of the game most times. But also, if you're going second in the matchup and it comes around to your turn 3 and you've survived their turn 3, most of the time the best play that you're going to get off, other than killing them on the clapback somehow, is by dropping the Energetic Frenzy Kefla. So if you're going second against Sin Shenron, I would recommend looking for this card in the mulligan, because oftentimes it does become your win condition if you can establish a board. But against Roy, it was a really fun game. He managed to draw extremely well. On turn 3, he exploded with both his Omega Shenrons, Pan, the Great Ape Whisperer, Salzino, a promo Sin Shenron which plays itself by sacking off one of your smaller guys to swing. I think he had 2 or 3 rages out. He also had his Bardock Overrealm, so he had like so many swings. And then I can't remember if I said, but he had Salzino on top of that as well. And then he also followed it up by being able to kill. I managed to establish 2 tournament pack Bojacks onto the board, and he had double haze in hand to kill both of them, which was really nice for him. But I managed to survive all of that on 1 life, and I believe I had like 3 guys on the board. Maybe, I think it was a 20k dual attack Bojack, and then maybe like a Gokua and a Beedle or something. But I had a fair few guys on the board, but because I'd gone second, it was a little bit trickier for me to actually do anything. And even though he was on 2 life because of his Pan Great Ape Whisperer, I wasn't actually able to kill him in the end because he had a blocker from the Omega Shenron, and he also managed to draw into 3 of his super combos. So he survived that turn with, I believe, 2 cards in hand, which was really, really unlucky because I was really close to killing him. But I only saw 1 super combo that game and he saw 3, so it was a little bit unlucky, but also it was just fair enough. Like, he drew really well. He played it really well as well. I'll give him all credit there. So that was another loss for me. At this point, I think I'm like 3-2. And then I play against another aggro Sin build. This guy was misplaying a little bit more. I believe he swung on turn 2. He had a rage down and he swung with the rage, and I immediately got rid of it with a 4-drop Bojack. And then I believe I used some combination of Galactic Buster and Bean to get rid of his second rage when he dropped it. And that meant that he couldn't go into his Omega on turn 2, which was really key because it meant he didn't have like a blocker. He couldn't start removing my cards. And so that kind of just gave me free reign because he didn't have any sort of board because I'd removed his rages before he could do anything. And then because I'd gone first in the matchup, I just set up to survive his turn 3, which I did pretty easily, and then dropped the Majin Buu Unison, and it was kind of curtains from there. Like, the Majin Buu Unison just carries you in certain matchups, and that was one of the matchups that it carried me. So I was able to finish that one pretty nicely. My next matchup was against another Sin Shenron build, but this time it was Control, and this was a really, really tricky matchup. A lot of micro decisions came in really clutch here. Because I've never played against Sin Shenron Control properly, especially with Blue Boujack. I didn't really know what I was doing. But my theory behind it was I just used my 4-drop Blue Bojacks to keep bottom decking his 9-drop Sins. Because I figured if like we're definitely going to get to turn 6, and I need to make sure that he's not reviving 9-drop Sins every single turn. So I just kept on bottom decking them, and it meant that I could pressure his leader a little bit easier, which was really nice. And then come turn 4, he dropped down his Meki Kabura Unison with 5 markers, and I immediately, I didn't even know what the card did, so I was like opening my Google Chrome tab, looking at the card and like checking it out. He kept on resting my 4-drop Blue Boujack and making sure that it couldn't restand, which was really frustrating. But come my turn 4, I think, or maybe it was turn 5, I can't remember if I went first or second, I managed to drop my Boo Unison, and I managed to clear through his 5-marker Unison on one turn, which was really, really clutch, and I just kind of invested all of my resources into that Unison, because I knew that if I got through that Unison, he didn't really have much defense. Then a couple of turns later, it goes to turn 6, and he tapped 6 and revived out. I think he had a 4-drop Haze, a 3-drop Haze, a 1-star Ball, a 9-drop, and a 4-drop. So it wasn't too bad for him, but it wasn't crazy good. And he also used, he also dropped his Sin Shenron SCR, the blocker that can restand in minus 5k every time. So I struggled to get through that board, and I think I then proceeded to just try and clear out his board as much as I could. Use and build my own board using like Bojacks and stuff, because I hadn't used my energy from that turn. And then I eventually just dropped Android 17, cleared off his blockers, and then just kept on investing massive swings into his Sin Shenron SCR to try and get through it, and eventually I managed to get through it and win the game. Another important thing that came in clutch in that matchup was Kefla. I managed to drop Energetic Frenzy Kefla on, I believe it was turn 5, after dropping down my Unison, and just using that along with my Unison to draw 3 and untap 3 every turn was so incredibly strong during that matchup, and I think that's what mostly carried me to the win. So I believe that was round 7, and then round 8, at this point I'm 5-2, so if I win the last round I get to top cut. And round 8 I was against my friend called Tom. His Twitch name, he streams and he's got a YouTube channel on Irritorum. I'll have links down below if you want to check him out, but shout out him, he's a really good player. He was on Cell Surge for the tournament, and I played against his Cell Surge before, but he changed it quite a lot for the tournament. He was playing like a more aggressive list with a lot more hand control focus, and I found that really tricky to deal with. We got to a really simplified game state where he was just like swinging crit each turn. I was dropping my 1-drop Gokuas and swinging crit each turn. And I believe what ended up happening was we both got stuck on 3 or 4 energy each because we couldn't charge cards because we were both top decking. I managed to get him down to 1 life and swing with a 35k Gokua swing, and then he used his Surge Awaken and top decked into Heroine's Lineage to steal it, which was really, really unlucky for me. And then later down the line, he managed to go for a kill swing using all of his hand and stuff. And what ended up happening, this is my big misplay of the tournament, which I'm really, really kicking myself over, because I really wanted to bring you guys a top 16 Blue Boujack list, but I didn't quite manage to do it. But anyone with slightly better play would have easily made top 16 just by playing this one match. Because when he went for his kill swing, not only did I forget about my all too easy in the drop area, but I also just completely forgot to awaken. And if I'd awakened, I could have comboed out of his first crit swing, and then it meant that his next swing wouldn't have killed me because he only had 1 card in hand, which was a super combo, and he only had his leader swing left. So if I just remembered to awaken and comboed out of the crit swing, I would have won the next turn, because I would have been able to drop Gokua down and just kill him because he only had 1 life left. But I'm gonna put that down to how long the event was. I think it started at like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning and then went on to about 5 in the evening. So it was a really, really long event. There was a lot of repairing going on. And I think that fatigue ended up just getting to me, and I just made a massive misplay and threw the game away and kind of threw top cut away. But he as well. The worst part of it all was that he only made 17th in the end, so he was one place away from top cut, which was a real shame for him. Um, but my point at the end of all of this is I really think Blue Boujack is a strong deck. You can definitely make top 16 with it. I kind of feel like just from that one tournament, because this is my first tournament that I've played with Blue Boujack in, um, just from that one result of coming, I think I came 33rd in the end, but almost coming top 16 if I didn't misplay like an idiot. Just from that one result, I really think this deck is really strong. And as long as green doesn't become a really strong color and people don't start running the Bardock Unison that gets rid of cards from the combo area, then this deck can definitely do really well. And I think that on a good day, if you get luckier than I have, with people drawing the negate off of their last card in life and stuff like that, you can definitely get top 16, and I think you can definitely win events with this deck. I really recommend giving it a try. It's a lot of fun. I always love decks that can play cards during your opponent's turn, especially during battle. So that's one of the main attractions to this deck. And it's a blue deck that really doesn't play like a blue deck. Because it feels a lot more mid-range than control, whereas a lot of the blue decks that I've played just feel like you don't really do anything except playing a negate that floodgates your opponent out of swinging for the turn and then passing. So it's really a lot of fun. I definitely recommend giving it a try. If you want to see some games of me playing this, I will be recording some of my own, but currently over on the Scrub Games channel there is one Blue Boujack mirror that's up, but there'll also be a few more that are coming up over the next few days, so I'll have links to them in the description. Definitely give this a try. It's a really fun deck. Take it to some events. I'm going to be taking it to some more events if I get the chance. I really want to make some top 16s or just top cuts with this deck to try and prove to you guys that it's really strong, and I think that it can do well. So yeah, give it a try, like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff, and I hope you guys have a good